techniques and designs. And on the base of each piece, the company or individual's touch mark was stamped to indicate its origins. The craft has evolved over the years with changes in fashion and lifestyle, leaving us with a tangible expression of the character of each era. The satisfaction of working with pewter and its attractive appearance and durability have kept the craft very much alive since this time. The material, too, has developed over the years, the main advance being an improvement in quality, made possible with the advantages of modern technology. Pewter is basically a high-quality alloy, containing at least 90% tin, and is one of the few applications where tin is used in almost pure metal form. As tin is a very soft metal, small amounts of antimony and copper are added to harden it and make it more durable. At one time, lead may have been added, which accounts for the especially dark color of some antique pewter. But in an effort to prevent the debasing of the metal in this way, and as the toxic nature of lead became appreciated, strict controls were brought in to prevent such additions. Today, pewter can be given a dark, antique look by using special chemical treatments. Most of the world's pewter is produced by specialist companies. After alloying, the molten metal is poured into molds to produce ingots. These are either sold to pewterers for producing an easily cast molten metal, or are converted into sheet. Cast ingots are scalped and undergo a series of rolling stages to produce pewter sheet. Because of its special properties, pewter sheet can be spun on a lathe to form any number of different shapes. Before delivery to spun pewter manufacturers, the sheet will usually be cut into blanks, discs or collar shapes from which the pewterware can be spun. The oldest method of forming metal objects is by casting molten pewter into hard metal or clay molds, and the skills of hand-casting quality pewterware have been handed down over generations. Molds, or dies as they're often called, are nowadays usually made of gunmetal or iron, and some still in use within the industry go back to the days when the pewter trade was at its height. The molds are painted with a suitable coating to prevent the pewter sticking. A time-honored mixture of egg white, red ochre and pumice is used, which, as well as facilitating removal of the cast piece, lends a particular sheen to the surface of the metal. Before casting the pewter, the mold must be preheated, either by making a few dummy runs or by heating in an oven. In the meantime, the pewter ingots will have been melted, ready for pouring. The joy of working with pewter, as against most other metals, is that any waste metal or faulty castings can be remelted for future use. Pewter has a relatively low melting point and is usually cast at between 300 and 400 degrees centigrade, although this will depend on the article being cast. Before casting, the dross is skimmed off and the pewter is ready for pouring. The molten metal is poured gently through a runner into the cavity. When gravity casting into fixed molds, it's very important that the mold begins in a horizontal position and is gradually raised to the vertical. This allows the entrapped air to be lost as the mold is filled. With the help of a little cold water, cooling is so rapid that the cast piece can be removed almost immediately. The mold is opened with a solid plug of pewter called a knocker and then reassembled for the next casting. After the runners have been machined off, the separately cast base and body are assembled and soldered together using a high or pure tin solder. Any signs of the soldered join are soon smoothed away, as the pewter body is finished by turning on a fast spinning lathe, stripping away the rough surface metal to reveal the bright sheen underneath. Attachments such as handles or decorative fittings are difficult to machine smooth, so spinning discs of fine emery may be used to remove surface scratches, followed by a buffing with a soft cotton mop to bring out the metal's natural shine. With the help of a cradle for accurate positioning and to facilitate even heat distribution, the polished handles are carefully soldered onto the bodies. The result? A gleaming display of traditional gravity-cast pewter, solid items of high quality, which will be treasured and passed on to future generations. These will become the antiques of tomorrow. Other more mechanized forms of casting, such as centrifugal casting in rubber molds, offer a more rapid production rate without sacrificing any advantages of the hand-cast product. The most immediately obvious advantage of pewter when centrifugally cast is the fine detail which can be achieved. In this process, molten metal is forced into cavities in the rubber mold by the centrifugal force generated by spinning. These cavities are made by pressing master patterns, usually made in pewter or brass, into rough holes cut in the rubber. The two halves of the mold are then placed in a vulcanizing press. Vulcanizing takes about 30 minutes at a temperature of 150 degrees centigrade, and the rubber flows around the patterns so that when the models are removed, the cavities reproduce all the detail of the masters. The rubber is now tougher but still flexible. Modern room temperature vulcanizing rubbers avoid the necessity of a press for the smaller manufacturer, although the molds tend to have a shorter casting life. Before casting, feeder channels, known as sprues, must be cut to allow the molten metal to travel from the central orifice to the surrounding cavities. After dusting with French chalk or talcum powder to facilitate release of the cast pieces, the mold is ready to accept the pewter. The discs are bolted together through locating holes to ensure accurate registration of the two halves, and mounted on the machine and rotated rapidly. When the required speed is reached, usually about 500 RPM, molten pewter is poured through the lid and into the spinning discs, centrifugal force evenly distributing the metal along the channels to the mold cavities. Spinning is continued after pouring for 2 to 3 minutes to ensure complete solidification of the metal. The result is a wonderful radial array of objects, exceptionally detailed and requiring only a little trimming for a very professional finish, which is a credit to the sculptor. The appearance on the market of small, low-cost centrifugal casting and mold-making machines brings the casting of small pewter objects within the reach of the individual. Wildlife sculptures, badges, or jewelry can be cast cleanly, safely, and at a relatively low cost. For the finished model, other attachments can be added by soldering. A good soldered joint is one that is difficult to detect on the finished item, and this is a skill worth perfecting, as it's a technique essential for the assembly of most pewter designs. Very little is needed in the way of equipment, only some flux to prepare the surface, a tin-based solder which comes as wire or in stick form, and a gas torch. However, care is needed in view of the nearness of the melting points of pewter and solder. The joint is warmed, the attachment tacked in position with a spot of solder, and then more solder flowed in around the joint. For attaching heavy components such as bases, an electrical resistance soldering technique is used. After polishing on a soft resin-coated mop, the bright centrifugally cast items are ready for packing and distribution. The remarkable ability of pewter to produce such fine detail is ideally suited to the accuracy and realism that the enthusiast demands from these models. The range of subjects reflects the wide variety of human interests and activities, from military themes to nature and wildlife. Pewter may be painted too, to achieve a totally different effect. These models call for considerable skill on the part of the painter, as well as thorough research as to authenticity, in order to please the keen eye of the dedicated collector. Pewterware can also be made by a technique called spinning. Spinning skills have often been passed down within a firm for generations, and what to the casual observer looks deceptively simple is the result of a well-trained eye and a feel for the metal that only grows with experience. Spun pewter is most often formed around a shaped mandrel. Called a chuck, this is generally made of steel or a hard nylon material, and for ease of removal, some may be composed of sections which fit together to form the correct shape. A pewter blank is first of all drafted into a cup-like shape by working the sheet around a fast-spinning chuck using special handheld tools. The pressure exerted and the angle of the tool are all a question of experience. A second, more complex chuck will then be fitted to achieve the final shape. It is fascinating to watch the skilled craftsman take a flat sheet of pewter and, as if by magic, mold it into a smoothly curved shape. After buffing with rough pumice, followed by a finer polishing, the parts are ready for soldering. Rotating on a turntable enables solder to be evenly applied around the seams. To reduce their weight, handles are usually made hollow by a technique called slush casting. Molten pewter is poured into a hinged mould, which is immediately inverted so that metal solidifies only on the inside surface of the mould. Sometimes, instead of a hand-held torch, the torch is fixed so that both hands are free to manipulate the solder and the tankard. The handle is first tacked into position, the flame is played gently on the areas to be joined, and solder wire from a coil is applied on every side of each join and drawn into the gap by capillary action. The finishing stages, and in particular the type of mop used, determine the final appearance of the pewter. Fine abrasives may be applied to a mop to give what is called a satin finish, resulting in a soft gleam with a unique quality of its own. Burnishing with soft mops will give a very bright, shiny finish. Tankards and other hollowware may be made by rolling flat pewter blanks into a cylinder. The blanks are usually decorated before assembly by embossing with a design, such as a traditional hammered pattern, and then curled and the two edges soldered to form a collar. Using a fixed flame so that a hand is free to hold the straight edges tightly together, the solder wire is dipped into the flux and stitched along the joint. To ensure the correct shape, the collar is spun on a lathe. Flanged, excess material is trimmed away, and any decorative lines required are scored into the body. Soldering and finishing operations complete the process. For the personal touch, tankards, competition cups, christening mugs and plates may be engraved, often using a pantograph for accurate transferal of a suitable design. The pieces receive a final examination and polish before being sent to stores, specialist pewter shops, or direct to the customer, each a shining example of a highly skilled craft. The softness of sheet pewter makes it ideal for handcrafting. The exceptionally high ductility of the alloy means it can be stretched, compressed, hammered or bent into almost any shape, and unlike most metals, does not harden when worked, so that annealing is unnecessary. Equipment can be kept to the minimum. All that is needed for cutting the sheet is an ordinary saw or simply a pair of shears. If the metal is scored or grooved, it can be folded to form different shapes, a sort of origami in pewter. Different thicknesses of sheet are available, down to a thin foil, which is ideal for raised relief work for pictures, photo frames and jewellery, or for building into applique designs on larger items. The texture of an original design is all important, and here the scope is limited only by the artist's imagination. The surface can be smooth, rough, shiny, matte, hammered, sculpted under heat, and so on. Pewter is ideally suited to the smaller workshop for casting too. Its low melting point means that an ordinary gas ring can be used for melting the alloy and no toxic fumes are given off. In dip casting, a solid, shaped mandrel is immersed in molten pewter and then withdrawn and rapidly quenched so that a skin of pewter solidifies on its surface. The rough outer form is then turned on a lathe to provide a smooth finish matching that on the inside. Quite elaborate pieces may be built up from parts such as these. The ease of working this unique metal gives the artist scope to develop interesting designs with a minimum of outlay and possibly high returns. Today, more and more designers are turning to pewter as a safe, clean and highly satisfying medium in which to work, very much a 20th century metal, but with an artistic tradition that can only continue to inspire future generations. Generations who will in turn add their marks to the long list of skilled artisans who have been inspired by this beautiful metal.